February 23rd, 705. Depending on where you are right now, looking at your phone or your calendar, that date might just look like a random set of numbers.
Right. It doesn't immediately scream historical turning point to most people.
Exactly. But if we rewind the clock well, exactly 1,321 years to this specific day, we land on arguably one of the most consequential moments in the entire history of East Asia, the first year of Shenlong.
It really is the day the sky changed color over the capital of China.
We are talking about the Shenlong Coup, the exact moment Wu Zetian, the only woman to ever officially hold the title of emperor in her own right in China's long history, finally let go of the reins.
Or, to be more historically accurate, the day she was forced to let go. And, I mean, that distinction makes all the difference in the world here.
Yeah, and that is exactly what we are jumping into for today's deep dive. Because if you open a standard history textbook or even just check a quick online summary, this event is usually wrapped up in a super polite sentence or two. Something like, Wu Zetian abdicated due to old age, and the Li Tang dynasty was restored.
It sounds so civil, like a corporate retirement party.
Right. You imagine a nice cake, maybe a gold watch, a polite speech from her son, Zetian.
And the reality was just anything but a party. Our sources show it was a high-stakes, blood-soaked game of 4D chess played out in the corridors of a dying woman's bedroom. We're going to completely dismantle that simple narrative today.
Our mission for this deep dive is to look at this not just as a transfer of power, but as a real masterclass in political survival. We're getting into the underlying logic of power vacuums. So just a heads up, we've got secret plots, we've got some really gruesome executions that make fiction look tame, and we have a whole period immediately following this that historians actually call the red makeup era.
Which I know sounds glamorous, almost like a fashion trend, but it was incredibly chaotic and violent.
So settle in with us. We are going to deconstruct the fall of the female emperor. And I want to start by setting the stakes here. Why does this specific date, February 23rd, 705, matter so much to the timeline?
Well, because it's the pivot point. Up until this day, China was effectively under a totally different dynasty, the Wuzhou dynasty. Wu Zetian had interrupted the Tang dynasty to create her own regime.
So she wasn't just a regent holding the seat warm.
Exactly. If this coup fails, or if she manages to pass power to her nephews instead of her son, the Tang dynasty as we know it might have just ended right there. The golden age of Chinese poetry, culture, expansion, all that stuff we associate with the Tang, it all hung in the balance on this one specific transition of power.
Okay, so to understand why this moment is so explosive, especially for those of you who might be new to this specific era of Chinese history, we have to set the scene. We need to look at the board before the pieces start moving, because Wu Zetian isn't the young, vibrant schemer we see in the TV dramas at this point.
No, absolutely not. We have to strip away that pop culture image completely. She is 81, maybe 82 years old. In the year 705, that is ancient.
Yeah, that's incredibly old for the era.
She is very frail. She has retreated to the Hall of Long Life, the Chongshang Hall in the Palace Complex in Luoyang. And here is the really crucial context that our sources emphasize over and over. She is completely isolated.
Isolated in what sense, though? Like, is she lonely, or is this a political isolation?
It's both, really, but the political isolation is what makes the situation so volatile. Think about it like a modern corporate structure. That's probably the easiest way to grasp the factional struggle here.
Okay, I like that. Let's run with the corporate metaphor.
So imagine a founder and CEO who built the company from the ground up. She gets sick, really sick, and she refuses to name successor, or she just refuses to step down. What happens?
The company panics, the stock price wobbles, the shareholders get incredibly nervous.
Exactly. You get a massive succession crisis. Wu Zetian had spent decades crushing her own sons to secure her power. She exiled them, imprisoned them, even drove some of them to suicide. She dismantled the opposition so thoroughly that she actually destroyed her own safety net.
So now, at the end of her life, she has created a huge structural problem. She's stuck in a deadlock.
Right. And to understand this deadlock, you really have to understand the underlying cultural logic of the time. If she gives the throne to her son, Li Jian, the Li family returns to power. That means her Wuzhou revolution is technically a failure. Her specific dynasty dies with her. It's just a restoration of the old management.
But if she doesn't give it to her son?
Her other option is to give it to her nephews, the Wu clan.
Yeah.
But that is a complete non-starter for the traditional bureaucracy and the general public.
Why is that? Is it just because they didn't like the nephews personally?
It goes way deeper than popularity. It's about the Confucian ancestor worship system. You have to think of this as the operating system of the entire culture. In that system, a nephew cannot offer the proper imperial sacrifices to an aunt in the ancestral temple. It literally breaks the spiritual lineage.
Oh, wow. So if she passes the throne to a nephew, she essentially becomes a ghost with no one to worship her.
Precisely. It's not just politics. Her literal afterlife is on the line. So she delays, she hesitates, she just keeps the position open. And in that delay, a massive power vacuum opens up. And you know how it goes. Nature abhors a vacuum, but power abhors it even more.
Right. And into that empty space step two very controversial figures, the two Zhangs.
Zhang Yizi and Zhang Changzong.
Now, the sources we're looking at often describe them as her male favorites or even, boy toys, which kind of feels like it diminishes their actual threat level in the court. It makes them sound like these harmless distractions.
It is a huge mistake to just think of them as lovers. In this political dynamic, you really need to think of them as the ultimate gatekeepers. Because the Empress is ill, she stops seeing her regular ministers. She stops attending the morning court sessions.
So they become the bottleneck.
Exactly. If you want to get a document signed, you have to go through the Zhang brothers. If you want to speak to the ruler of the known world, you go through the Zhang brothers.
They are basically the chiefs of staff from hell.
That is a perfect analogy.
Okay.
And they completely let the power go to their heads. The sources actually use a really evocative phrase to describe them. Monkeys wearing hats.
Wow. Tell us how you really feel.
Right. They were arrogant. They started dressing up like royalty. But much worse than that, they started killing royalty.
Yeah, I was reading about the incident with the Prince of Shao and Princess Yongtai in the source material. This was the moment where I realized, okay, these guys aren't just annoying bureaucrats. They are highly lethal.
Yes, and these were grandchildren of the Empress. Just think about that for a second. Her own flesh and blood. They were caught privately gossiping about the Zhang brothers, just complaining about their outsized influence, like teenagers might complain about a strict teacher.
Yeah.
And the Zhangs found out about it.
And what did they do?
They went straight to Zetian, spun this exaggerated story of treason and gross disrespect, and Zetian actually ordered her own grandchildren to commit suicide.
That is a terrifying level of influence, to be able to convince a grandmother to execute her own grandchildren over some private gossip.
It really shows how incredibly dependent she was on them in her final years.
Yeah.
And that event has to be the tipping point. That's when the anti-Zhang coalition really forms.
Right. Because you can annoy people at work, but once you start taking out the royal family, you unite everyone against you.
Exactly. So going back to our corporate metaphor, you have the shareholders, the Li imperial family, who want their company back and are genuinely terrified of being killed next. Then you have the board of directors, the bureaucrats, who absolutely hate that these two unqualified personal assistants are running the company into the ground.
And crucially, you have corporate security, the military, specifically the imperial guards.
Yes. Now, normally, these three groups do not get along. The scholars usually hate the generals, and the generals usually distrust the royals. It's a very fragmented ecosystem.
But they all hate the Zhangs more. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. And this brings us to the key players of the actual coup. We refer to them historically as the five kings of Shenlong, though they definitely weren't kings just yet.
The leader of this group is Zhang Jianzi. And what I find so fascinating about this guy is his age. He's an 80-something-year-old chancellor.
He is a remarkable figure. He's not some hot-headed young rebel trying to burn the system down. He's a career company man. He has served the dynasty for decades. And he just decides, enough is enough. It's almost like the old guard stepping in to save the institution from itself.
And he teams up with the muscle, General Li Buzio of the Imperial Guard.
Because without Li Duozo, this is really just a meeting of grumpy old men complaining in a tea room. With him, it's a military coup. You need the swords.
So let's walk through the timeline of how this actually goes down. The sources give us a very specific play-by-play. It's February 20th, 705.
February 20th. The sun goes down over Luoyang. The conspirators decide to make their move. 500 Imperial Guard soldiers march directly into the palace complex. Now, usually marching 500 armed soldiers into the inner sanctum of the palace is completely impossible.
Right, but they have the generals on their side.
Exactly. They have the security codes, so to speak. They bypass all the checkpoints and head straight for the corridor outside the Empress's bedroom, the Hall of Long Life. And the Zhang brothers are actually right there, in the corridor or the courtyard, depending on which account you read. They're likely just intercepted while on duty.
And the soldiers don't hesitate at all.
No. And this really highlights the brutal efficiency of Tang dynasty politics. There is no formal arrest. There is no reading of charges or a trial. It's an immediate summary execution. The heads of Zhang Yizi and Zhang Changzong are severed right there in the hallway.
No grand speeches, no, you're under arrest by order of the chancellor.
Just cold steel.
And then comes the scene that really sticks with me from the reading. The boss fight, if you will. The obstacles are gone, the gatekeepers are dead on the floor, now they have to go inside the bedroom. They have to confront the dragon in her den.
Imagine the sheer tension in that room. This woman has ruled the empire with an absolute iron fist for half a century. Even old, even bedridden, her presence is terrifying to these men. She is the only human being in the empire who is technically considered divine at this moment.
So the soldiers surround her bed.
Yes. She wakes up, sees the blood dripping from their swords, sees the armed guards, and then she sees her son, the crown prince Li Jian, standing there among them looking probably quite sheepish and terrified.
Because he was terrified of her, even with an entire army backing him up.
He was absolutely petrified. And she asks him a direct question, right?
She does. She looks right at her son, completely ignores the generals, ignores the bloody swords, and says, the 2 boys are dead, so it was you. And then she says something totally devastating. She says, now that the villains are gone, you should return to the Eastern Palace.
It's such an incredible power move. She is actively dismissing him. She's saying, okay, you killed my assistants, point taken, you made your mess, now go back to your room.
She is treating him like a naughty toddler, not a conquering rebel.
She is trying to assert dominance one last time. But this is where the corporate boardroom metaphor kicks in again. The CEO is trying to fire the board, but the board brought security with them.
Exactly. Zhang Jianzi, the 80-year-old chancellor, steps forward. He breaks the psychological spell she's casting. He doesn't bow to her demand. He says, the crown prince has come to execute the traitors. The emperor is old and sick. The will of the people and the gods is that you pass the throne to the crown prince immediately.
It's a hostile takeover, right there in the bedroom.
It's a demand for the corporate seal. Hand over the keys to the company.
And she realizes it. The source says she looks at the chancellor, looks at the armed soldiers, looks at her shaking son, and simply gives up. The fight finally leaves her. She is forced to hand over the imperial seal.
So that all happened on the night of the 20th. Then things start moving very fast. February 21st, she issues an edict making the prince the official regent. February 22nd, she officially abdicates the throne. And February 23rd, the date we started with today, the Tang dynasty is formally restored.
And everyone cheers, the credits roll, and we get a nice, tidy, happy ending.
Right. See, I have a feeling you're setting me up here because looking at the aftermath section in our source materials, it is incredibly dark. It's significantly darker than the actual coup itself.
It really is the darkest part of the whole story. And honestly, I think it's the most important underlying logic for you to understand about power dynamics. The coup was the easy part. Surviving the victory is the hard part.
Let's unpack that logic. Why isn't it a happy ending? The good guys, the 5 kings won, they restored the rightful emperor, they saved the Li family dynasty.
You have to think about the psychology of the new emperor, Zhang. He is finally sitting on the throne. But who put him there?
The 5 kings, Zhang Jianzi and his whole crew.
Right. And if 5 men have the operational power to storm the inner palace, execute the Empress's personal favorites, and force the most powerful woman in human history to abdicate, what can they do to him?
Oh, I see where this is going. If they can make a king, they can just as easily break a king.
Exactly. He is terrified of his own saviors. He looks at them and he doesn't see loyalty. He sees a massive security threat. And there are people actively whispering in his ear to stoke that paranoia. Specifically, his wife, Empress Wei. And here is a massive twist. Wu Sanxi.
Wait, Wu Sanxi, Wu Zetian's nephew, the guy who was supposed to be the enemy, the entire reason the coup happened was to keep him out of power.
Politics makes for extremely strange bedfellows. The Wu clan is down, sure, but they are not out. Wu Sanxi's the ultimate survivor. He realizes his aunt's era is finished, so he pivots immediately. He aligns himself with the new Empress Wei.
Our sources even suggest he likely became her lover to cement the alliance.
Yes, they form this totally new power block, and they start telling the emperor, look, these 5 old men are dangerous. They have way too much clout in the court. You need to handle them before they decide they don't like you either.
And this leads directly to a strategy mentioned in the source material called Ming Sheng On.
Ming Sheng On Zhang. It translates to rising in rank, falling in power. It is a classic, ruthless bureaucratic trap. It's actually something you still see in modern corporate politics today.
Walk us through how it works in the context of the Tang Dynasty court.
So, the emperor holds this grand ceremony. He publicly praises the 5 coup leaders as absolute heroes. He tells them, "You saved the dynasty. You are amazing. You are the very pillars of the state." And as a reward for their service, he promotes them to kings. They officially become the 5 kings of Shenlong.
I mean, being named a king sounds pretty good on paper.
It sounds fantastic on a business card. But in the fine print of the promotion, they are quietly stripped of their actual functional positions as chancellors. They lose their chief executive roles in the government.
Wow. So they get the shiny title but lose the actual job.
Exactly. They are given these massive salaries and beautiful titles, but they are legally banned from the daily government meetings. They are basically told, "You're all so noble and respected now, you only need to come to the palace on the 1st and the 15th of the month just to say hello."
They were completely kicked upstairs.
They were promoted into total irrelevance. They lost their ability to govern. They lost their access to the intelligence files, the official seals, the daily decision-making apparatus. And once they lost that practical political cover, the trap just snapped shut.
This is where it gets genuinely gruesome. The source details the ultimate fate of these 5 men. And I think we really need to share this because it drives home the sheer brutality of this era. It wasn't just a matter of, oh, go into exile and write some sad poetry.
No, not at all. Wu Sanxi and Empress Wei wanted them completely erased from the board. They eventually framed the 5 kings for a fake rebellion, the Tianjin Bridge leaflets incident. They claimed these old men were secretly plotting treason against the new emperor.
So they used that to exile them all the way to the south.
To the furthest, most malaria-infested regions of the empire at the time. Lingnan. But even exiling them to a disease-ridden jungle wasn't enough for the new regime. The emperor sends a special envoy, a man named Zhu Lizan, to, quote-unquote, ensure they don't cause trouble.
It was a hit squad.
It was an imperial hit squad.
Let's talk about what happened to Yuan Shuji. The description in our material here is just visceral.
Yuan Shuji, yes. He was forced by the envoy to drink beggarweed juice. It's a highly toxic plant native to the region. The source describes the physical effect incredibly vividly. It causes such intense abdominal pain, such severe swelling and burning, that the text says he clawed the ground until his fingernails were completely gone.
Oh, wow.
He was just trying to dig into the earth to escape the sheer agony. And then, when the poison wasn't killing him fast enough, the envoy just beat him to death to finish the job.
That is horrific.
Yeah.
And what about Huan Yanfen?
His fate is perhaps the most shocking to me. They didn't just execute him, they dragged him. The source says he was tied to a bamboo raft, but not smooth bamboo, rough, heavily thorny bamboo. And he was dragged behind horses across the rough ground of the jungle until the flesh was literally ripped from his bones. Then he was beaten to death.
And these were the absolute heroes of the dynasty just a few months prior. They literally saved the emperor's life and got him his job back.
There's an old Chinese proverb perfectly suited for this. When the rabbit is caught, the hunting dog is cooked. It is the brutal, underlying logic of authoritarian power. Loyalty is absolutely not a shield. In fact, extreme competence and extreme loyalty can easily be seen as threats. If you are capable enough to single-handedly save the emperor, you are capable enough to destroy him.
It wasn't just the kings who suffered during this fallout, right? This purge went super deep into the civil bureaucracy.
Yes. This brings us to what's known as the 9 exiles of Lingnan. The coup triggered a massive cultural and political plunge across the capital.
I actually saw the name Du Shenyan in the list of the exile. That's the grandfather of Du Fu, the incredibly famous Tang poet, right?
Correct. The literary elite, the high-level scholars who had thrived under Wu Zetian, or who were just unfortunately caught in the crossfire of the factions, were all sent south. This is often politely framed as changing the guard. When a new CEO takes over, they fire the old management team and bring in their own people. But in the Tang dynasty, getting fired meant being sent to a tropical region where you would very likely die of disease.
So let's look at the scoreboard for a second. Wu Zetian is gone. The 5 kings are dead. The so-called good guys are completely wiped out. Who is actually left running the field?
This is the supreme irony of the entire Shenlong Coup. The whole point of the coup was supposed to restore male rule. It was supposed to restore the traditional Confucian order, where men rule from the front and women stay quietly in the inner quarters. Instead, it kicked off what historians call the red makeup era.
Red makeup referring to the women at court.
Exactly. For the next 8 years, from roughly 705 to 713, the Tang court is completely dominated by women, who are all basically trying to be the next Wu Zetian. The coup didn't stop female rule at all, it just fragmented it among several incredibly ambitious women.
Who are the key players in this era? because reading the sources, it seems like the palace became an absolute viper's nest.
It really did. First, you have Empress Wei, the wife of the new emperor. She saw exactly what her mother-in-law Wu Zetian did and thought, hey, I can do that too. She starts blatantly selling government positions, literally selling monk certificates and official titles to the highest bidder just to build up her own personal war chest.
And she eventually poisons her own husband, the emperor, to try to take full power.
Yeah,
right?
Yes, incredibly ruthless. Then you have Princess Anne, their daughter. She is just as ambitious, if not more so. She actually formally petitioned her father to create a brand new title for her, Crown Princess.
Wait, Crown Princess? Like the official heir to the throne? That didn't exist in Chinese history, right?
Never. The heir apparent is always strictly male. But she wanted to be the official heir. She wanted to be the next female emperor. She was looking at the glass ceiling Wu Zetian shattered, sweeping up the glass and making a weapon out of it. She lived wildly extravagantly, building personal palaces that completely rivaled the emperor's own.
And then we have Shengwan,
The female prime minister. She was a brilliant, totally fascinating character. She was originally Wu Zetian's personal secretary, an acclaimed poet, and a master politician who navigated between all these warring factions. She managed to serve Wu Zetian, then pivot to serve Empress Wei, and kept her head attached to her shoulders while everyone else was losing theirs.
at least for a while. And finally, we have Princess Taiping, Wu Zetian's favorite daughter, who eventually becomes the most powerful player of all of them.
Yes. So the coup essentially proved that Wu Zetian wasn't just a historical anomaly. She was a pioneer. She broke the psychological barrier for women in power. After her, every royal woman looked at the throne and thought, why not me? It led to immense corruption, absolutely. But it was also a period of incredible female political agency that we very rarely see in ancient history.
I want to zoom out for a second here, because we so often look at Chinese history in a total bubble. But this source material draws a really fascinating international comparison to another part of the world.
Yes, the Byzantine Empire.
Empress Irene of Athens.
She's really the only other historical figure who perfectly matches Wu Zetian's specific profile. She ruled the Byzantine Empire about 80 years after Wu Zetian, around 797 AD.
What are the specific parallels the sources highlight?
Well, both of them started out as imperial consorts. Both became regents for their young sons after their husbands died. Both heavily used religion to legitimize their unconventional rule.
Right. Wu Zetian used Buddhism, claiming she was a Maitreya Buddha incarnate.
And Irene used the restoration of religious icons in the Orthodox Church to gain massive support from the clergy. But the really critical difference, and I think this tells us a lot about Wu Zetian's underlying psychology, is how they handled the mother versus son conflict.
Because that's the core tension for both of them. A female ruler giving birth to the male heir who is culturally destined to replace her.
Exactly. Wu Zetian ruthlessly crushed her sons politically. She exiled them. She publicly abased them. She even made them change their family names to humiliate them. But in the very end, she let the coup happen. She handed the seal over to Zetian. She died in a palace bed, heavily honored as an empress. She knew exactly when to fold her hand.
And Irene. How did she handle her son?
Irene was biblical in her response. When her son, Constantine VI, tried to take executive power away from her, she didn't just exile him or demote him. She had him arrested, dragged directly to the Purple Chamber.
The room where he was born.
Yes, the very room where he was born, which symbolized his royal legitimacy. And she had his eyes completely gouged out.
Oh, just wow.
She permanently blinded him so he would be physically disqualified from ruling. It was a permanent physical mutilation of her own child just to maintain her grip on power.
That is just intense.
And ultimately it backfired on her. Wu Zetian's method, which was ruthless but highly politically calculated, allowed her dynasty to continue through her bloodline. Irene lost all her political support because of the sheer horror of her act. She was overthrown by her own treasurer and died in exile, literally spinning wool to survive.
It really highlights the extreme corners these women were painted into by their societies. To hold authority in a strict patriarchy, they felt they had to go to these unbelievable lengths.
They absolutely had to be harder than the men around them. Think about the double standard. If a male emperor kills a rival, it's just politics. It's Tuesday.
Yeah.
If a mother blinds her son or kills her grandchildren, she's labeled a monster. They were constantly navigating a massive minefield of gender expectations.
Speaking of navigating minefields, let's talk a bit more about Wu Zetian's psychology. The source material describes her almost like a modern sociopathic CEO.
Yes, the psychological profile in the research suggests she had what they call low internal friction.
I really love that term. What does low internal friction mean in this specific historical context?
Well, most normal people waste a lot of emotional energy on guilt or doubt or imposter syndrome. Should I do this? Am I a bad person for making this decision? Will people hate me? Zetian just didn't seem to have that mechanism.
She viewed the entire empire as a massive business to be managed.
Exactly. If a son was acting like a bad vice president, you just fire him. If a minister is an obstacle to a merger, you simply remove him. She didn't let the emotional weight of her actions paralyze her decision-making.
The source calls her dauntless.
Dauntless is the perfect word. That's exactly how she survived for 82 years in a literal snake pit of a court.
Heh.
She treated human emotions as data points to be managed, not as directives to follow.
Now, before we get to the end of the timeline, we really have to bust some pop culture myths. Because when you have a historical figure, this legendary, pop culture just goes completely wild with the details.
Oh, absolutely. The myths take on a life of their own.
Let's talk about the golden turtle bag.
The golden turtle bag.
Right. Because I've seen this pop up in video games like Assassin's Creed settings or in these wild online fan theories. The idea is that the two Zhangs, the favorites who were executed, were actually part of a secret shadow society, kind of like the Templars, called the Golden Turtle Bag.
It's a really great story. It makes for fantastic video game lore. But historically speaking, it is complete fiction.
So what actually was a Golden Turtle Bag in the Tang Dynasty?
It was a purse, literally just a fancy bag. In the Tang Dynasty's civil service, officials of the third rank and above were given a golden bag decorated with a turtle motif. It was used to hold their official tallies, these little fish-shaped metal keys that proved their rank and gave them access to the palace.
So it's just a status symbol.
Yes, like having a corporate platinum card or a specific VIP lapel pin. It absolutely was not a secret underground cult of assassins controlling the empire.
Okay, so no secret assassins. What about the Shenlong cult? I've seen that mentioned too.
Ah, the Shenlong cult. This is a massive confusion caused by Louis Xia, the incredibly famous Wuxia novelist. In his book, The Deer in the Cauldron, there is a major faction called the Shenlong cult. But that book is set in the Qing dynasty, literally 1,000 years after the Shenlong Coup.
Ah, okay.
And the cult in the novel is actually a political satire of the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. It has absolutely zero historical connection to the Shenlong Coup of 705. People just see the word Shenlong and conflate the two.
So note to our listeners, don't confuse your martial arts novels with your Tang Dynasty history.
Please don't. The real history is dramatic and violent enough without adding magical kung fu cults to the mix.
We're coming up on the end of the deep dive, but I want to touch on the mysteries that are still unresolved in the source texts, specifically the role of Princess Taiping.
Ah, the ultimate survivor of the era.
She was Wu Zetian's favorite daughter. She was incredibly smart, deeply powerful. So why on earth did she actively support the coup against her own mother? Because she is officially listed as one of the key supporters of the restoration.
That is the million-dollar historical question. The sources are extremely murky on her exact involvement. Some modern historians suggest she was actually the real mastermind behind the whole thing.
Really? How so?
Think about the outcome. The five kings took all the physical risk. They stood in the front line with the swords. But who benefited the most when the dust settled? Taiping. She emerged from the chaos significantly more powerful than ever. She was given the unprecedented title of Town Pacifying Princess.
Was she essentially using the five kings as her white gloves, like setting them up as the fall guys?
It's highly possible. She was smart enough to know her mother was falling. She knew the Wuzhou ship was sinking fast. She likely chose to jump onto the lifeboat of the Coup, and she may have even helped push her mother off the deck just to save herself.
That is ice cold.
Well, like mother, like daughter.
And the other big takeaway we need to cover is the domino effect. Because the Shenlong Coup wasn't just a one-off event that fixed everything.
No, not at all. It completely broke the political seal. It proved to the military that if you control the Imperial Guard, the Northern Army, you have the power to change the emperor overnight. Before 705, that was a massive cultural taboo.
And after 705?
After this, it's open season. We have the Jinlong Coup, the Tanglong Coup, the Xianting Coup. That's 3 more massive, violent military coups in the span of just 8 years.
It turned the capital into a bloody revolving door of emperors and regents.
It fundamentally militarized Tang politics. The dangerous precedent set on February 23, 705, haunted the dynasty for over a century. The soldiers finally realized that they were the actual kingmakers, not the scholars or the bureaucrats.
So as we wrap up our analysis today, February 23, 705, A day of supposed restoration, but in reality a day that just unleashed an entirely new kind of chaos on the empire.
It was the definitive end of the Wuzhou experiment. Wu Zetian proved, once and for all, that a woman could reach the absolute apex of power. She ruled effectively for decades. She expanded the empire's borders. She totally reformed the civil service examination system. But the patriarchal system she suppressed just snapped back violently the very moment she let go.
But she did leave us with one final incredible mystery that I want to leave our listeners with. The blank still.
The Qinengli Mausoleum, yes. She is buried there alongside her husband, Emperor Gozong. And there's a massive stone monument standing right in front of her tomb. Usually these stills are completely covered in text praising the emperor's lifelong deeds. He conquered this land, he built this canal, he was so wise.
But hers is different.
Hers is completely blank. Not a single word is carved into it.
Why do historians think she requested that?
There are basically two prevailing theories. One is a theory of profound humility. The idea that she felt her deeds were just too great or perhaps too complex to be captured by mere words.
And the other theory?
The other is pure, unadulterated defiance. It's her saying, "You people cannot judge me. Future history cannot judge me. I am entirely beyond your words and your traditional morality. I did exactly what I had to do to survive and rule."
I have to say, that is the ultimate final power move.
It really is. She effectively said, "I'll just let the silence speak for me." And here we are, over 1,300 years later, still doing deep dives to try and figure her out. So honestly, I think she won.
I think she did too. That's a wrap on our deep dive into the Shenlong Coup and the fall of the female emperor. Keep mulling over that blank steel, and we'll see you all next time.
Keep looking beneath the surface.